This is Interface Design. Where do I start? I'm James Scarpetta. I'm a senior FileMaker developer at the Scarpetta Group. I've been working with FileMaker for about 6 years. Started doing it with writing documentation in a FileMaker 11 file. And then from there, it just went into learning UI and helping with layouts. How many people use FileMaker 11 and 12? Yeah, so we all know pixel counting with the shadows and that, yeah. So that's when I started using it. I'm certified in 12 to 17. I am located in Simpsonville, South Carolina, married with my wife and 2 kids. My background is actually in graphic design. I've worked for advertising companies creating ads and things for a number of years. And I do photography on the side. So if you don't find me doing this, I'm behind a camera. All right. So why are you here? You're struggling to where to begin with designing your layouts, which can be very overwhelming. And with the various devices that you can design for desktop, iPad, phone, web, you just don't know where to begin. So you also see great design but don't know how to get there, I guess is the right words. Or you just wanted to come and hang out with me. Interface design is important. Why is it important? It gives for a better user experience. It keeps users focused. Show of hands, how many people have downloaded an app and they couldn't figure out how to use it? And on that same show of hands, how many people downloaded an app and you had to type in everything instead of just clicking a button? Yep. So we see it all the time, and that's why you see a lot of apps when they say there's an update out, there's a new interface to make for a better user experience, because they found that people can't get through them the way they want. It also really, that kind of ties into, it just makes things easier to complete, your tasks. Here's kind of an overview of what we're going to go through. I'm going to go through a little toolkit, just things in FileMaker that you need to know about. Some styles and themes I'm going to touch upon, some design resources that I would suggest you go look at and use. Then we're going to talk about really where I start, and then what you do next. And then I'll show you some examples, and we'll get into a demo file where I show you a redesign on an app that I've done. So for tools, let's start with slide controls. So slide controls give you a different way that you can use for navigation. You can use them for swiping and getting to your next step in a process if you needed somebody to fill out a registration form, for example. Or you can, as I said, use them for navigation and script them with buttons. If you use them as part of your design, what you do want to make sure, if you've used slide controls, is if it has the allow swiping checked or the show navigation dots, don't have those on if you're not going to use them. So you might be in an app and all of a sudden you swipe across it and now it's swiped into a layout that you didn't want it to go to without hitting a next button. Another one is button bars. So button bars are great. How many people use them? So the reason I like button bars over regular buttons, you can add calculations into them, so you can dynamically change what they actually say. So if you needed to say next, or if it needed to say save or continue, you can dynamically change that in your scripting. They also, again, I use them for slide controls so I can create navigation. And who here has used the new master detail layout? Okay, a few. So master detail layout, if you haven't used it, you need to take a look at it. It is awesome. It eliminates the need to have a self-related table or use a global relationship for your records. So imagine being able to have a list view on a layout without having to change it. For example, if you have an iPad, you go to a contacts layout, the contacts are on the left, and then you have your details on the right. It's the same context for using that. And then layout parts. Layout parts, top and bottom navigation. Use it all the time. You want to know the difference between them. So top and bottom navigation allow or stay on the screen no matter what you're doing. So if you're swiping up as opposed to headers and footers, which will swipe with you, those were always static. And then the body part, where it just displays your data. So styles and themes, why do we use them? Well, they're easy to change elements. So if you have a bar across the top that's a certain color, let's say it's blue, and you need to change it to a different shade of blue, now it's got to be navy blue. Instead of having to go back through 20 layouts and changing it, you're able to go through and do it on one, save it out, and it takes it through the entire process. It also improves performance. I would suggest there's a session today called Understanding Themes and Styles from 3 to 4 back in this room, to come check it out. And then here's some design resources. So I have a bunch of icons that I use from Icon app. If you've never used that, it's a great tool to sign up for. They have a free account that you can access, I believe, 500 icons, or you can get an account, and I'm not getting paid to tell you this, but it's $49 for a lifetime, and they have everything from people to AT-ATs from Star Wars on there. So you've got a wide range. But you also can download them in multiple sizes up to, I think, 512, and in multiple file types, so PNGs and SVGs. Now with, I believe, 16 when it came out, we were able to use SVGs. Anyone using SVGs all the time? Yes. So you can download those, and with the little snippet of code, putting it in the SVG file, you're able to use them, and they will translate into FileMaker and let you change the colors. The main difference between SVGs and PNGs, I do want to mention, is PNGs you would have to go, if you added a plus symbol and it had a hover state and a active state, you would have to add an icon for each one in those different colors, as opposed to the SVG where you go in, you just change the color and it's ready to go. There's also Flat Icon. I haven't used them much, but they have a bunch of icons on there as well. If you've downloaded this PDF yet off of the community, you will have, these are all clickable links, you can go right to their sites. And then reference. I have read, when it was still a book form, I've read the Apple Design Guide from cover to cover, and now they have it online so you can go find what you want. It's a great resource if you're designing, especially for mobile. They just have everything you need, spacing, what they recommend for font sizes, icon sizes, just any little things you may need. And then I also follow the InVision app blog. They talk about a lot of UI and UX, just things. Today, I believe they had an article about Netflix redesign in their app. So check those out as well. And then colors. Does everyone here, or how many people here have a hard time picking colors for their app? A lot of you, okay. So check out Adobe Color. It's great. It's free. You can just sign on. If you have an Adobe account, you can save your color schemes. But you can go on there and search for things like, you can say blue and green, and it'll show you all the blue and green themes that they have. You can just scroll through the Explore, so latest themes that they have going on, and then decide what you want from there to use for your color. And then there's another website, Coolers, that you can check out as well, very similar. So while we're on the subject of colors, so why do we use colors? Well, colors are indicators for users. They tell them that they can perform an action. They also can tell them that there's some data they need to see. Maybe it's a name, maybe it's a warning. So we want to use colors that users can see but that aren't obtrusive to the design. So keep your colors simple. Don't do the whole shade of the rainbow in your app, but keep them simple and make them easy to see and have it flow through. So you wouldn't want to create a Christmas app and use pink and blue. You'd use red and green, right? Also, you can use shades of colors. So you can see that in the example up here, it shows all the shades. So if you find a color scheme on Adobe and it's blues and greens, you could use different shades of them. That'll allow you to use more colors in your app without having to sway from the theme. And another thing to think about is if you know your users are colorblind. I know it sounds, most people don't have to worry about that, but if you do, make sure you're picking colors that are very contrasting so they can see them. So let's go to where do I start? So first thing you need to decide is who's using your app. Is it a user? Is it a customer? Is it a salesperson? You need to know who is using it. And then you need to decide what devices you're going to design for. So whether it be for the desktop, an iPad, an iPhone. But there's kind of a cross between, I kind of see a cross between who and what, and there's kind of a where, because it could be a salesperson that's on the road using an iPad versus a salesperson that's in an office using a desktop. So you kind of have to decide who is using it to decide what you're designing for. And then there's the what. So it's the same scenario, but it's just thinking about if it's going to be used in WebDirect. There's different things that you have to do in your design and layering for WebDirect to work properly. Something else to consider is the ease to enter data on the device. I asked you earlier if you had trouble or you had to type a bunch of text in. Make your device easy, add the things that are simple for you to the user to enter fast. Then they're going to want to use your app. This session does assume that you have all the requirements for the app, so you know what it needs to sort of do, and it's just that you're working on the design. It's also overwhelming, so I'm hopefully going to help you simplify it a little bit. So what do you do next? Well, I say get inspiration, and I say search Google for R&D. But I'm not going to say R&D in the traditional sense. I saw a photographer a number of years ago in a session, and he said the same thing I'm telling you. You think in research and development, but it's really rip off and duplicate. So when I'm trying to design something, I'm not saying I'm going to go and steal someone's FileMaker file and go, or somebody's app and go copy it completely, but I may find elements from it that I like. So in that instance, I will go pick those elements out. I might sketch them, I might print it out, circle it, and have those ready so I can mimic it later in my design. So basically, don't reinvent the wheel on it. And then there's wireframing that we're going to speak about. So does anyone in here do wireframing when they're creating? Few hands, okay. I would recommend that you do wireframing almost all the time, unless it's an app just adding a layout to an existing app. It just helps keep you consistent and you can see what you're building. And then the last step is really just build it. So going back to get inspiration for a minute, so I put some common search terms that I look when I'm searching Google. So you've got modern UI design, just straight up UI design, but you can get more specific. I wouldn't suggest you type Contacts iPhone layout because you're going to get all of Apple's Contacts iPhone layouts. But you could say Contacts mobile layout, and it'll return a bunch of different layouts that you can look at as images. Some of them even have templates that you can purchase. Also look at other apps. If you have an app on your phone that you're using and you like the way that it works and it's just the design, the layout, everything flows well, take inspiration from that. It's already there. Or go look at other apps that are doing something similar. Search if it's an invoicing app on your phone. Go search the App Store, download it, look at what other people are doing and try and make it better. So let's talk a little bit more about wireframing. So what is it? It's sketches or prototypes that represent your layout designs. So it really is just a sketch. A lot of times if I come up with something I'm going to work on, you'll see me in a restaurant with a pen and a napkin sometimes that I just came up with it and I need to write it down. So it can be as simple as that. So how do you create them? As I said, you can use pencil and paper, napkin and pen. There are desktop apps and there's iPad apps. The photo that you see on here right now was actually I used Note Shelf on the iPad to create that. So going into the resources for them, again, pencil and paper, everybody has those. For the iPad, I recommend Note Shelf. It's nice because you can download different papers. So they have a paper for iPad, they have one for iPhone, just straight white blank paper. They have the graphic paper and line paper, just anything that'll help you sketch out. The Adobe Comp is another one. If you have really bad drawing or you don't want to draw it, Adobe Comp is another iPad app that you can get more finished look. So when you draw a box, it'll create a box instead of leaving it as the pencil sketch that you have. And then Apple Notes. Since Apple added being able to draw in there, you can draw and add notes at the same time. For the desktop and the web apps, I recommend Balsamiq. It kind of has that draw feel look, but it can be a little bit more, it's just neater and cleaner. You also can use Lucidchart. They have apps between the phone, or the iPad and the desktop, or Adobe XD. If you use Adobe XD, they also, what's nice, it prototypes. So you can actually do more with it as far as clicking a button to see a layout. So you can prototype it a little bit better. Or you could use what you already have and prototype in FileMaker, just don't make it the final layout, right? So continuing, screen stencils. Does anyone use them? Good, you should. So screen stencils are just guides to help you size for the layouts. This is the default FileMaker sizes that when you click on screen stencils, they're up in the top right. You can see that little icon to the left of that down arrow. They just help you size for the device you're building. You can also create custom sizes. Where the custom sizes come in handy is for the phones. If you go to that FileMaker Go resource that I have on here, there is actually a whole list of what device you're designing for. So if it's the original iPhone, if it's an iPhone 5, an iPad Pro, 10-inch, I see someone shaking their head, yep. But it doesn't just show you the size, it shows you whether or not you want to have those status toolbars and menu bars in the top. So instead of having to redesign it later thinking, oh, I've got this extra space or stretch, you can design it without having those if you would know the proper size. So you can click that link and it'll take you right there as well. So I'm going to just go through some examples now of some wireframes to layouts, and also then we're going to get into the demo. So the first example I have, it's a weekly report. It was, we had to design it, so the requirement was that it needed to manually update sales totals. So they needed to be able to quickly search between projects and sessions for the company, and or search, and then also be able to search it. So they needed to toggle between them because they were in different tables. So here's the original sketch that I drew out because it needed to be simple and quick. And the goal for this was to keep the workflow, as I said, simple and have a consistent UI with their theme. So here is the final. Much better, right, than my drawing, of course. So the colors that are there actually match the theme. And I used a button bar at the top so that we can toggle between the two layouts. The size of the layouts, because it's being used in a card window, I made exactly the same so they toggle correctly and they don't flicker or resize or anything crazy. And then the search bar is right there. So this also allows them to, they have to go one more level, so when they click this button, they actually get into, if they click a session, into a training day where they actually select the instructor so they can change the rate. And here is a session layout. So this was an original session layout. It was built in an older version of FileMaker. I believe it was 7, I think, or 11 rather. The goal with this was, or the requirement was to combine multiple systems in general with this project and create different processes for better reporting. But the goal for the UI was to update using newer tools that we have available to us in current versions, and then just an overall new experience instead of using tab panels. So here's the result. A lot cleaner, right? So it's definitely been cleaned up. It did combine multiple systems. We have button bars across the top in the left using for edit modes and things. We also have the button bars at the top for the navigation with the slide controls that are there instead of using tabs. And the main challenge with this was to be able to maintain the integrity of the UI with the amount of data that was required to be there. So you can see there is a lot of data there, but it's still clean and easy to see. So here's just a fun one. My wife actually asked me, she was working on a yearbook tracker or in an Excel sheet. Anyone still use Excel sheets? Oh boy. Okay, so I saw her using an Excel sheet to store yearbook orders for the school that my daughter goes to. And I just, well, being a FileMaker developer, I had a heart attack. So I said, hey, you know what, one weekend and you cook dinner and I'll take care of it for you. So I ended up sketching out really quick, just a quick layout just for orders. She just needed a way to simply add sales, track student and teacher orders, and then export it out so she could know which rooms the books go to. So my goal in this was a simple color scheme and then just quick entry on an iPad. So that's what I came up with. So very quick, she can filter by teacher right at the top. And it also sub-summary sorts by grade and grade, teacher, and then student. And then if you look, one of the things I want to draw attention to is I've shaded, I said that you could use different shades of a color. So I've shaded the colors all the way down. So you can see that it goes from a dark blue to slightly lighter to lighter all the way down. So one thing I do recommend is when you're doing a layout, you could do what I call the squint test. Stand back and squint at it. If you see just a big blob of color in the middle of the layout and it makes no sense, maybe do something different there. But if you squint looking at this, you'll see that it kind of has that vignette feel which you get with a photo. So you got dark edges and it moves into a lighter color. And then here's a company's layout that we've updated. So the goal here was to update the theme, get some new colors in. It already looked great, but we wanted to see where we could take it with doing some small changes. So we updated the theme. We wanted to update the theme, give it some bolder fonts, and then add some user actions that aren't currently there. So here's the redesign. So as you can see, the colors have changed. The navigation at the top has a little bit more color popping. There's a user's action in the top right, so you can see its common user tasks. And you can also see that the design on that popover, the icons aren't visible until you hover over it. And that was done deliberately because sometimes icons can be overused. So rather than have them there all the time, we chose to just do them on hover. And it kind of gives it just a little bit more of an animation to it as well. And then we created added the slightly bolded fonts and then lightened some of the lines on it to make it stand out, the data stand out and be more prominent. And again, going back to I have to always find something fun to do, right? My kids on Christmas or holidays can never do anything just normal. So my wife wanted to do a scavenger hunt, and she's done it before on Easter. What we decided to do this past year is I built an app for it. I said, you know what, I'm going to take it to the next level because my son's 12 and he loves technology. So the goal was to create a scavenger hunt app on the phone. They'd answer clues, and you'd have a parent and kid mode. So the parents could enter the clues and the kid would go find them. So the goal was to keep a Christmas color scheme, and then I was going to have it scale for a phone or an iPad. So that's the result. So you can see I didn't choose to go with the traditional red and green. I just decided to keep it simple with red and white. But we have the clue there. It's just a very simple design. The parent's view looks just as similar. And then one thing that I did add as a kind of a funny touch in here was I exported the answers as barcodes. So then they could actually, instead of typing the answer in, he could click it and scan it for a barcode. Just something kind of fun. All right, so now we're gonna have a little demo. What I will tell you, just to preface the demo, is it's from one of our clients and friends, Stuckey Insurance, and it's his CoverCore app. CoverCore was designed to connect agents with customers, so for insurance signing up and getting quotes. So we built it. It had to be built for. Remember all those things that I said in the beginning, desktop, web, all that? Yeah, it had to work on everything all at once. So the challenge was being able to get it to, with the UI, work on a phone in WebDirect with all the layering, and then also work on an iPad with a different size layout. So the first layout I'm going to show you is the original iPhone, the customer list for the iPhone. So if I was logging in as an agent, this is the list that I would see. Now, the design on it we thought was great to begin with, and I wanted to take something that was great and try and make it better on my own. So if we take a look, we're going to start with the header. So when you look at the header, there's a few things that could get some work on. Apple Design Guide, if you read through it, actually says with logos that the logo should only be in the beginning and use colors from the logo throughout your design rather than put the logo on every page. So it's one thing, it just eats up space. So instead of putting it there, we could put a small icon if we wanted. We also have this, I can circle here, this search bar. It's a combination of a search and a filter. which can get a little confusing because right now you're in the search, but it has a filter icon, but when you flip it out, so it can get a little confusing there when you're doing it. And then just part of the header as well is this, the found count. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you the new header side by side with this. So here's the new header that I designed. So you can see that I stayed with the consistency of that light to dark that I spoke about before. So, on the left, instead of going, blue, blue, and then just straight into gray, I tried to make it more of a gradient down. I also put the layout name that I'm on. It doesn't exist over here. I mean, it does subtly down on the bottom with your navigation, but I put the layout name so you really know where you're at. And then instead of having the user preferences stand out as obvious as it usually is, I chose to make it a little more subtle by using a shade of the color that's there. So in here, again, I didn't show this one. Let me open these up. Didn't really need to change it. So that's another thing, is when you're redesigning, you don't have to redesign everything. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But if you want to change some things, go ahead. So I liked the design and the layout of this. There's other things that happen behind the scenes on this, so it has to be this tall. And when using WebDirect, card windows don't fully function as they do on FileMaker Go, so we stayed with the popover. But just subtle changes. So I changed that icon like I did here so it's a lighter color, adding the white for the text so it just stands out a little bit more. And then the button on the bottom, just a shade of that blue as well. Another thing that you'll notice is instead of having just the one icon here, there's two. So the one that you're on, whether you're filtering or searching, not taking up much more space than it did before, I have both of them there, but it highlights white so you know which one you're using. So it's just a kind of a little design tip that you can fit it if you need to. You could even make them a little smaller if you needed to gain space. Now to go side by side, we're gonna show the body. So the body of this here was good. We designed it so that it was kind of similar just to seeing just a single person snapshot right when you're looking at it. So you have either an image there or just the first two initials of the name, the arrow just to go to your record, the name, and then just some tasks. So you can favorite it, you can create a message, or you can get a quote right here. So some of the changes that I wanted to make were just simplifying this. How can I get more, if somebody's using an older iPhone, like an iPhone 4, how can I get more on here without breaking the design? So this is what I changed it to. Does it look better? Okay. So I decided to go with a smaller form factor. There's a slightly bigger, instead of having just a single line in there. Open the gap up a little bit so it's a little easier to separate your different records that you have. But also putting the line there for your message and your favorite. And as I was doing this, I could add the get quote on here, but part of me thought about it, and the user, if they're gonna get a quote, you kind of need to know more about that customer before you go in. So I felt we'll put that on the form view layout instead of the list. But you can favorite, and you can see as far as the favorites are, it just toggles right there. And just very simple and very clean. Just left the arrow off to the right, small, put a little icon for the location, and the company name's right underneath the person's name. And then lastly, the footer. So there wasn't really much wrong with the footer, but I thought, let's see what we can do with it. So when I started looking at the footer, again, there wasn't really anything that I wanted to change, but I wanted to make some subtle adjustments. So in here, a couple little things, I know they're kind of hard to see on the screen right here. You'll see them in the demo file. You can see, for starters, this 7, it's kind of taller and it kind of covers the icon. So I just narrowed it up a little bit to let the icon stand out. I also gave it a slightly thicker font. So instead of making it, I think I used Helvetica Neue, instead of using light, I used regular, just so it stood out a little bit more. And then the only other thing I did, and it may be very hard to see, but I gave it a very subtle gradient. And I believe it was even just the FileMaker default gradient. It's just a very, very light gray to white. So it's there, it's not overdone, but it just gives it a little bit of depth. All right. So I do want to show you now, we're going to show you the customer detail. So I said that this goes from a list to a form view. Obviously on a phone we can't fit everything on one layout. So here's the form view version of it. I'll slide this off to the side for a second. Let's open it up. So very similar in design for the header. It had the logo. It has the user icon, preferences, and then a button to go back to the customers, which is the list. Kind of the same thing here. We're using a lot of space, but I mean it looks great. Just we're using a little bit of space that we could probably use better. And then it scrolls. Now you could design, again when I say wireframing, you could design a bunch of sketches where you either scroll a whole iPhone layout or you could use slide controls to go from section to section. I chose in this to scroll it. It just works better. But I'm also using top and bottom navigation. So these items on the bottom are staying static as well as the top. So as I'm scrolling, you can see they're not moving. And then as you scroll through, you can see we have, I've got to go to a different record here. This has data in it. So you can see that there's data in here. There's portals down here showing additional data. They have some icons in them. And then just other bits of information that you need. So how could I make that a little bit better? Like this. So because we couldn't scroll, or because we can't have these, we want to keep the messages and the favorites within the record, I pulled them over to this phone layout. And rather than have the email and the phone and the website all listed out here in different blocks, I chose to make them slightly smaller underneath. That's actually a stacked button bar using the icons, and you could create, if you made them just slightly taller, you could click on them so they could have actions. So the email could, open your email, like the browser could just open the browser. And then again, you have your message and your favorites. I also gave a slight gradient in here. Again, I know it's probably hard to see on it, but it's so subtle you really don't see it. And then I put an image there. So rather than have just the 2-digit name, this more just says, hey, there's supposed to be a person here and there's not. And it also gave it this look with the color. So try and make it stand out instead of just staying gray or black. There's also a tiny drop shadow under here. Just something to help separate it and make everything below it just seem like it really belongs above with it. And then you just scroll through. But in the same amount of space, or the same amount of data, I've shortened the space for someone to scroll. I also moved these buttons that were down on the bottom by utilizing the header better and getting rid of the logo. And I felt that user information didn't need to be on a customer detail. We can do that on the list views where they're more just straight navigation. And this is strictly, what you're in here for. So I moved these buttons up. Since that moved out, I was able to gain space and move these up at the top for your actions that someone may need to perform, seeing quotes, policies, and documents. But by doing so, I gave the button for get quote, I made that stand out. So if an agent's looking through this and they only get to the top portion here and say, yep, based on just these 3 fields, I can get quote right now. You can't do that over here. The minute you've scrolled, it's gone. So it makes for a better user experience. So now I want to go into an iPad. I said that this had to be designed for a phone and an iPad and work in WebDirect. So I'm going to show you two different layouts. We'll start with the phone or with the iPad list view. So little subtle differences from the original phone view that you saw. We have the user who's using it, picture up top with their name. We also have the user information in here as well. So it seemed kind of, doubling up. We had a plus symbol. This is just so that users can create, or agents can create new customers. The navigation is also at the top. And then we have our filter and search over here. You can see in this list view that we have some more information that shows up. So you have revenue and just different industries that they might be part of. And then we have the About section, which picks up the beginning in the notes about them, just the thing they filled out. And then the buttons over here, and then your arrow to go to your detail view. And then down on the bottom, we have the logo right there. So before I can show you the update, I want to show you the detail view. So when you would click the arrow on this, you would land on this layout. So here's the detail view. Again, it's still very clean. It still looks good. We have the buttons here. In this scenario, we don't have to worry about it scrolling because it's an iPad. It does scroll a little bit if these go further or the text is longer. The icons are down here for the email and the web. And then you have the address and the phone number information there. And then we have at the top just the button bar with those same statistics you saw on the iPhone. And again, in the header, we've used the user details and then also the photo on the left. So when I was starting to look at this, I said, how can I make this better? And I was starting to look at it and separate it. And then I said, hey, guess what? FileMaker's got a great new tool. Master detail, right? Why don't we use it? So in here, that's what it changed to. So you can see it obviously expands. So you can see the subtle differences I made by just changing it and using the tools that are available. So up at the top here, I have my search right above the detail portal. I've mimicked what I did on the phone, so it has some consistency here on the left column. So when someone goes from an iPad to a phone, they will actually see the difference, or they will notice a similarity, I should say, in it. And then I kept the consistency off to the right by putting the information in the same way. So now that header information is similar to the iPhone. It has the shadow that's cast down, the image right there with the address and the phone numbers in that button bar stack. Again, in these two columns, if you will, they have the data. So I didn't want to change it much. I felt that it was clean enough as it was, but I did lighten the lines so there was a little less obvious separation. And then I made the labels smaller and the font's a little bit bolder, just so it stood out that much more and gave it just a subtle color from the same theme that I'm using. The navigation also went down to the bottom. So now it's very similar to the iPhone. Again, it stretches. So depending on which iPad or web browser you're using, we have the found count over here, but then I could keep that icon in the top right because it made sense on this layout. This is just straight up customers. So as I scroll through, it's always the customers. The Get Quote button, just big and bold in the top. So you have the person's name and it's right across from it and says, hey, click me, I want a quote. And then those other three navigation items on there. So I added those in right here. I thought it gave it a nice, cleaner look and simple. But then I looked at this a little further. Can anyone see, and just to show yes or no, is there anything that you would do different on here based on what you see? Well, I saw something that could be changed. So I took it one step further. I was looking at it and I said, we have this search bar over here. And this was right while I was working on this right after I finished this layout. And I said, we have the found count over here. It kind of doesn't make sense. And then we have this here, the button bar here with the other options they can do. Well, that limits me to stopping right about here, and if that's a long address, it's going to get clipped. So what did I decide to do? Well, I'm going to show you. I decided to go in here, and I've already pre-built it, so if we were running short on time, I didn't overdo. So I decided to make this a little smaller. So we're going to slide that over. We're going to drop that straight to the bottom. I decided to add my found count over here. So now it all lines up and makes better sense with what I'm doing, which means this can go away. And then I said, you know what? I have this space up here. What can I do with it? Well, why don't I keep consistency with the phone and let's slide it over and get rid of this. That would allow me to make this button slide over a little bit. I could make it bigger. You know, you could stack it at this point. And there you go. Oops, where did that go? Sorry. Slide it down 1 pixel. Must not be in the part. There you go. Better? So just a subtle difference there allowed me to get something that just stood out more. It just made more sense. So when you're doing your designs, look at it that way. If something doesn't quite add up, see if you can move it and make it work. It took me, all of a couple of minutes just to shrink it down. And then this got to be bigger, but it also allowed me to grow with it. So if we have to add more buttons for other things, I can add them stacked over here and just shrink this back down. I do have one more little thing I'm going to show before I go to questions. So under here, I decided to do something just a little fun. Now, in this system, we aren't doing this. No one can delete anything. But I thought I'd leave you with just a little fun trick. There is some scripting involved, but the scripts are in the sample file, so you can go see what I did. And it's very simple, and you can make it a little more complicated if you want. But how many people wish that in FileMaker we could do those really cool iOS swipe and get delete and all that stuff? Well, I wanted to do that. So in your demo file, if you're in the record, you can swipe, and it pulls it in. So kind of just a cool little thing you can try doing. You can add different things to it. So if you had, let's say this had to have multiple, with another client, we had to have it do multiple things. So it needed to do a phone call or an email. And instead of trying to fit them all in the layout or make them go to a detail, they could just swipe with their finger and it would pull all the buttons over. By clicking another record, it goes right away. Same thing, just swipe over it. Pretty cool? And I wanted to, before questions, I just kind of wanted to give you a quote that I found. I was looking through a bunch of them, and this one kind of stood out, especially for me, because I do it all the time. So there's no learning without trying lots of ideas and failing lots of times. And that was from Johnny Ive from Apple. We all know who he is if you've watched the keynotes. It kind of makes sense, though. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to design a layout and I do multiple sketches or I do multiple things. You have to try it and then realize it doesn't work to get it right. You may do 10 of them and get one. You may do one and get one. Just don't be afraid to keep trying them if it's not working. And that leads me to, are there any questions?
Do you have resources or recommendations for people that are looking to make their own SVG icons?
If you're going to use or you're going to create your own, I mean, you can, I'm not a total SVG guy, but you can use Illustrator. So I've taken some of the icons, from Icon app that I spoke about, and they may have, I may need to combine two of them. So I've been able to take them into Illustrator, combine the two of them, resize it, export it, and then it still works in FileMaker properly.
Nice.
If that answers it. As far as the other icons, I know how that one works. I don't know how the other ones work.
But you haven't seen anyone blogging about that or giving some good suggestions on that?
I haven't at this point.
No
but feel free to, come up afterwards and give me your info, and I'll check it out and get back to you.
Thanks, man.
One thing, since we're talking about SVG icons, that you do want to know, and I found out by total accident. Has anyone had to go in and edit the code for the icons? This is a little more advanced thing. Okay, so one thing that I figured out, and I don't know if you've noticed it, you won't notice this if you're just using FileMaker or FileMaker Go. You'll notice it in WebDirect. In the code, and again, this is more of an advanced topic, but you have to put, the class equals FM fill so that it changes the colors in the SVG code with TextEdit or Text Wrangler or whatever you use.
Okay.
There's also a color there. So when I download the icons from Icon app, it actually has, whatever color I had. Usually it's just defaulted to black. So it'll say fill, and then it has the color. Well, I thought I was being cool when I, I changed it to white so that when I'm in dark mode, in my screen, I could see them in it. What I didn't realize is that if you have a color in that SVG code, when you put it to WebDirect, it doesn't matter what color you chose in FileMaker, it holds the SVG color. So just kill the color out, it'll just default to black in FileMaker in your little icon window, but then you're able to use your colors. Took me like 3 hours to figure out why it was always white.
That's great to know, thanks.
So just some final notes. Just community, you can check out the speaker space on community. And then session updates. This session, I'm not planning to have any updates. However, I did break my own rule with my demo file, and nothing has a style or a theme to it. So, right? I was short on time. So I may throw an update out within the next few weeks that I actually style everything. So then if you go in and make a change, you can see it fly through. So you can check it, but as of right now, I'm not planning to update it. And then don't forget to fill out your evaluations. And thank you all for coming.